How's it going, guys? Vaibhav here, and I've just woken up to the news that the Asus Zenfone 8 series is finally official, and I was pretty much tired of all the rumors because they've been going on for more than 2 weeks. I thought I'd make a video when I saw the rumors first, but then I just sort of forgot about it, and I wasn't really feeling it because the Asus Zenfone 7 seemed to be very similar to the Asus Zenfone 8 Flip. So I didn't really believe the rumors, but today I have to, because the Asus Zenfone 7 is a carbon copy of the Asus Zenfone 8 Flip, which is kind of disappointing. The 8 Flip is the 2021 variant of the flippy smartphone, but everything about the specifications on the smartphone is identical. So you get the 6.67-inch display, Full HD Plus, 90Hz, Super AMOLED. You also get a 64 megapixel camera, identical IMX686 sensor, a 5000 mAh battery, again identical. And the only thing that's different on the Zenfone 8 Flip is the processor. So the processor on the 8 Flip is of course the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 chip, whereas on the Zenfone 7 it was the 865. So in terms of every other experience, it's practically identical. But that brings me on to the Asus Zenfone 8, which is sort of the showpiece for the 2021 lineup from Asus. Now, we don't know anything about a Pro Max version of the 8 coming soon. However, if you focus on the 8, the strategy that Asus is going for is completely different from the strategies that other smartphone manufacturers go for. So other manufacturers sort of bundle the best of what they have with the biggest screen of their smartphone, whereas in this case they're sort of going for a small screen form factor. So it's a 5.9-inch display at 120 Hz Super AMOLED, so everything is flagship on that front, although the overall form factor of the smartphone is shrunken down. So the width of the smartphone is around 68 millimeters, which is really thin. The Oppo Reno 5 Pro 5G, which is a smartphone I reviewed recently, was extremely thin, and that was around 74 millimeters. And the actual height of the smartphone is only 148 millimeters, which again is quite impressive. Just as a comparison for you guys to get a better understanding of the size of the phone, because I don't have it, the Samsung Galaxy S10e was around 142 millimeters, so that was already fairly compact. So the Zenfone is pretty much 6 millimeters more than that, whereas the iPhone 12 mini is around 131 millimeters. So it's not quite the size of the iPhone 12 mini, but definitely smaller than most of the average flagships from the Android side of the world. The flippy screen is also now gone, and that's where the overall robustness of the smartphone really shines. So instead of the flippy screen, you get a screen on the front with an IMX363 sensor for your selfies, but you also get IP68 certification, you get Gorilla Glass Victus protection on the front, but only Gorilla Glass 3 protection on the back of the smartphone. So it's more of a sacrifice that you make. You don't get the best out there when it comes to protection, but IP68 is a big thing, and it's the first time any Asus smartphone has had IP68 certification, which kind of doesn't make sense given the fact that the technology has been out there for more than 4 or even 5 years. Processor wise, it's no surprise to see once again the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 in there, so this is a flagship at the end of the day. And in terms of cameras, I did mention the front camera. The back camera is again different from the 8 Flip. So the sort of confusion between the two smartphones really makes me think which one the flagship smartphone is and which one isn't. So the primary camera on the Zenfone 8 is a 64 megapixel IMX686 sensor. So it's the exact same sensor found on the Zenfone 7. And I know for a fact that in terms of real world performance, yes, it did have its glory moments, but in terms of processors and sort of smartphone processing when it comes to camera, especially in 2021, I don't think the smartphone will be able to keep up, at least with the newer sensors coming out like the IMX766, for example. There's also a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle camera on there, and it's only a dual camera setup, so you're not getting telephoto configuration, which is limited to the Zenfone 8 Flip. Although the Zenfone 8 Flip doesn't have optical image stabilization for videos, whereas on the Zenfone 8 you do get optical image stabilization for video, and video goes up to 8K 24 FPS. And as a side note, before I forget, The selfie camera on the front of the smartphone is also a 12 megapixel sensor, and in fact the actual sensor is the same as the ultra wide angle camera on the back of the Zenfone 8. So a lot of confusion. The Zenfone 8 Flip, on the other hand, adds an 8 megapixel periscope telephoto lens, which gives it 3x optical zoom, something the Zenfone 8 typically lacks. So yes, in terms of consistency, Asus is sort of all over the place. One thing that it is consistent with, which I sort of commend it for, is the fact that it does support 4K 60 FPS video. So all okay on that front. At least they didn't go the Oppo or the OnePlus route, where their flagships didn't even have that option on the front-facing camera. Other things of note is the Zenfone 8 does have a 3.5mm headphone jack, which means FM radio support, although it doesn't support it in the EU, so that's something to keep in mind. And the Zenfone 8 Flip doesn't have a headphone jack, so again, that is something to keep in mind. In terms of the overall battery capacities of both of these smartphones, you're looking at a 5000 mAh battery on the Zenfone 8 Flip and a 4000, so slightly smaller than your typical average for a flagship in 2021 on the Zenfone 8. Both the smartphones support 30-watt charging. Some would say the charging speed isn't flagship enough, but this really means 0 to 60% in 34 minutes, which I think is decent enough. So I think those are sort of the highlights that you need to keep in mind when it comes to the Zenfone 8 and the Zenfone 8 Flip. Do I think Asus did a good job with these smartphones? Not particularly. I feel like if they sort of merged some of the specifications on the 8 Flip with some of the specifications on the 8, you'd get one outstanding smartphone. But with the Zenfone 8 and the Zenfone 8 Flip, you get two smartphones that do good things, but also give you the same amount of sacrifice on both smartphones, which kind of doesn't make sense from an overall value perspective. Some would argue that Asus should have gone the route of a big display smartphone as well, so perhaps the Zenfone 8 Pro Max, which would have, you know, a 6.6-inch Super AMOLED, 120 Hz, maybe would have a periscope camera that's sort of borrowed from the Zenfone 8 Flip, then would have IP68 certification as well, and perhaps faster charging, so a 5000 mAh battery with 65-watt charging. That could be the ideal Asus Zenfone 8 Pro Max, but it isn't official, so that's just my wish list. In terms of how Asus did, I'd give them a 6.5 out of 10 for this release. Once again, I do want to check these phones out for real world performance. One thing that Asus claims that's really interesting is the software. So Asus says that their Android experience is more zenful when it comes to them having a skin on top of Android, and that's something that I do want to check out because I've never used an Asus smartphone in the past, but hopefully in the next few months that will go away. Thank you guys for watching. This was Vaibhav, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.